partner with Axon, you immediately gain access to a full range of products and solutions designed to meet the complex needs of today's grower. We carry all major brands and sizes of tires and wheels. We specialize in large diameter wheels for large equipment. We have one of the largest OEM replacement wheel inventories in North America. Known for extreme flotation setups, duals, and triples, we have wheels for all makes and models of tractors, sprayers, combines, and grain carts. If we don't have the wheel in stock, we'll custom build, sandblast, and paint in-house. There isn't a more vast inventory in North America dedicated to helping dealers move more iron. With facilities on the West Coast and in the heart of the Midwest, leverage our 230,000 square feet of indoor inventory to solve any problem a grower may have. Move more iron with Axon.
Moving iron.
Hello and welcome to MovingIronPodcast. I have I have Andy Caygeon Junkin here with me, and he is back again to talk about what he sees happening out there at family farms. And today we're kicking around what we're going to talk about, and time management rose to the top. So, Andy, how you doing, man?
Good, lad. How are you?
Good, man. I tell you, time management is, I'm sure I'm not on an island, but time management is one of the things I struggle with the most, with all the stuff I have going on and what you need to balance with activities with your kids and your work and everything else that's going on. There's just a million things that pull you in a million different directions, and it seems like when I need to be doing something that's meaningful, I feel like I'm doing something that's not meaningful. So I guess talk a little bit about your experience with that, Andy.
I mean, I think there was a survey done a couple of years ago, and most surveys related to my field, there's farmers quite often tell the survey taker what they want to hear, what they think everybody should say, but not the truth. But in this case, they actually came back. It was Minnesota large herd dairy operators, and they came back with a survey that the biggest struggle that they have in these family farms is the work-life balance. And I think that kind of reflects accurately what's actually going on. As one guy said in the survey, and his feedback was, he said, look, if I put as much time into the barn as my dad expects me to, I may have taken our 1,500 cow dairy to a 3,000 cow dairy, but I won't have a wife in 10 years' time. And he said, what's the sense in working your butt off if you lose all of it through a divorce? Right. And I think that's a real reflection on where things are at. If you actually look at the divorce rate it's 50% across the general society. I mean, agriculture 20 years ago, divorce was quite rare. It's becoming more and more prevalent. And it's a reflection of work life. Obviously, if you can spend more time with your family, that's quality time. It's not going to solve all your probability of divorce, but it's going to have a big factor in this. And you actually look at the divorce rate in New York City, it was actually 83% divorce rate for small family business owners, instead of the 50% that the society was at normal. And that the reason for that is the extra stress of the business and the extra stress of working with in-laws. And so I'm really concerned that we may have over 80% divorce rate in agriculture within 10 years because of the extra stress of working with in-laws and the extra stress of the business. And I think that we have to get really serious about figuring out a better work-life balance if we're going to reduce the probability of divorce in the sector, because if we don't, we're going to have a bigger debt and farm crisis than we did back in the 80s.
Yeah, and I see that. So one thing I want to bring, you sent me a chapter of your book that kind of outlines this stuff, and I read through it, and there were a few things there that really popped out to me, and one of which was the comment that was in there that the majority of the second or third generations come back in the farm repeatedly said, I don't want to work like my dad did. I don't want to be where my mom did. I don't want to work, 24/7, 365 and have no life outside of the chores I have to do and the farm that we have here. I don't want to miss my kids' games. I want to do all those kind of things. I want to be home at 6 or 7 o'clock at night. and I want the weekends off, and those kind of things. And you, as you read through that chapter, that kept bleeding through more and more. And you had a good scenario in there that you laid out about a situation that popped up with you. Talk about that a little bit and how you worked through that situation.
Yeah, I mean, basically, a buddy of mine from college. I remember going to his wedding back 20 years ago, and I was envious. I mean, he had they had a very successful farm. They were actually expanding their dairy to be a 400 cow dairy. And the contractors went bankrupt actually shortly after the wedding. They were actually in the midst of the construction, and they were actually supposed to have the wedding in the barn, but they couldn't because the contractors went bankrupt. Well, it turned out that they had to finish off the barn themselves. They couldn't. I mean, the contractor ran out with their capital, and they were really in a tight spot. And the bride, the farmer, was fully supportive, and so she stuck by. She says, "You know what? I know for a couple of years we're going to have to work hard," and she was fine with that. And she had actually a child just 6 months after the wedding, not 10. And I think that they had another child in that course of that 5-year period. Mm-hmm. And essentially, my buddy called me up, and she said he was like stunned that she had actually left him. And I convinced her to pull over and sat with her in the Burger King parking lot in Woodstock, Ontario. And she basically told me her story. I mean, while the two kids played in the ball pit there at the Burger King. And she basically said, "Look, I love the farming life. I love it." She says, "I love my in-laws. I really love my husband, but this is crazy how many hours he's working. Like, he's working from 4 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. I've inherited a dining room table 2 years ago. He has yet to have a meal at it. I mean, at Christmas, we had my family over, and he had to leave dinner because he had to go calve a cow." She says, "There has not been a day off in the last 5 years since we got married that he has had a day off work." And she says, it's just insane. And she says, he was supposed to look after the kids while I went for an ultrasound. We're supposed to have another baby. And by the way, it's a boy. He doesn't know that. But she says, I couldn't even trust him to watch the kids for two hours while I was at the doctor's office. He couldn't come with me to the doctor's office because he was too busy. And the problem we had is we almost lost a kid today. And there was a farm accident. I'm not going to go into the details of it, but the kid basically playing in the ball pit had a pretty severe scratch on his arm, and it could have been a lot worse. But for her, that was a breaking point where she says, like, this is crazy. He's running ragged. And all I've wanted for the last couple of years is to hire, like, all I've been asking for 6 months is getting kids on weekends to do the chores so they can milk cows at nights. And there's a good kid just across the road from our farm. He'd be perfect for the job. He costs us $15 an hour, which the farm can afford. I've been doing the books for the last 2 years. I know that we're out of the red now, but what really upsets me is my father-in-law says there's no money for that. And all I want is for my father-in-law and mother-in-law to be able to take Saturday nights off to go on a date. And for me and my husband to be able to take Sunday afternoons off and take our kids to the park or do something beyond the farm. Because the only time the kids see daddy is at the farm. I mean, by the time he comes home at night, they're already asleep. And she says, this is the thing is that I'm upset because I've been asking this for 6 months. I've been told by my father-in-law there's no money for any labor. And, you know, when we had the barn expansion, we had 2 extra guys working for us full time. We doubled the size of our herd from 200 cows to 400 cows. We haven't hired anybody extra since. We had one guy fall off the barn roof because he broke his back, and the other guy quit because there was too much work. And we decided as a family that we just work more hours in order to make it through these tough times. We're past those tough times. And my father-in-law says there's no money for extra labor. But the truth is that he had no problems in going off and buying a farm across the road for $20,000 an acre on Tuesday this week. He never even talked to us about that. But we don't have enough money for a $15 an hour employee on weekends. This is ridiculous. And she says, we don't have a life beyond work. All it is 24/7. I mean, my husband's working 18-hour days on a slow day, and he's going to be in a coffin by the time he's 40 if we don't get something sorted out. And so, I went off to, I got her a hotel room across the road, and went out to see the in-laws and Junior. And behind the barn, Junior had a lot to say, but he got in front of his father. We sat at that kitchen table. All Junior did was look straight at the kitchen table. He didn't have eye contact with me or his dad, and his dad did all the talking. And his dad was a big man, and he had his one finger was the size of two of mine. And he started drilling his fingers in the table. He says, "This is when that girl married my son. I told her it was a 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week job. If she doesn't like it, she can go." And I said to Junior, "Did you have a prenup?" And Junior looked at me with a deer in the headlight look. I said, "What percentage of the farm do you own, Junior?" And the dad said, "We're 50-50 partners." I said, "Well, with the amount of debt that you guys have, with the amount of capital that she's going to take out of this farm, you just lost the farm." And there was a awkward silence in that kitchen at that moment. And then I said, more importantly, what the heck's doing all of this if your kids are going to grow up 5 hours away living in the city? All you're going to do is raise trust fund kids. They're never going to be interested in farming. And they're going to grow up to resent the farm because dad worked too much. And the old man was sitting at the kitchen table, and he started crying. And he tried to explain to me like how he and the young guy would feed TMR mixture to the cows every morning, and how the young 4-year-old would drive that tractor, and how he loved farming. And he just started sobbing like it was a really awkward silence, and that was a situation I walked into, and I think a lot of farm families struggle with this kind of similar circumstances.
All right, so you sit down there and you had this kind of a breakthrough moment with the father and the son talking about what's going on the farm. What did they do next to help remedy the situation?
They essentially, I said to them, like, you only got two problems here. You got three different problems. I said the first problem is that you guys are talking over top of each other instead of listening to each other. You've been telling your daughter-in-law how it's going to be, and you expect the farm to operate how you see it. You've never taken the time to understand it from her perspective. That's got to change. We got to start empathizing and understanding each other's perspective, not talking over top of each other, right? We got to see the farm, instead of it being my farm, it's got to become our farm. So it's not hell on earth for a young bride, but it's heaven on earth for everybody involved in the operation. And the second thing is we're going to do that by achieving investing time like it's money. Basically at this time, you guys treat time as if it's a finite resource or an infinite resource, where it's really a finite resource. And I told them, like, the thing is, Arnold Schwarzenegger, he said, if you everybody only got 24 hours in a day. He says if you got to sleep 6 hours a day. He says if you got to sleep more than 6 hours, I suggest you learn how to sleep faster. And then he said, you give me, show me how you spend the other 18 hours. I'll show you where you're going to be in 18 years' time. And in Junior's situation, he was at the farm for 18 hours a day, but he was not effectively working a chunk of that. There was times that he'd come in for breakfast and lunch, and he'd basically, his parents lived on the main farm, and they refused to actually, when they got married, they refused to actually switch houses with Junior, which was what was supposed to happen. But essentially, the parents had envisioned building a house down the road, but they couldn't afford to do that with the contractors going bankrupt. So the parents had stayed put on the farm, and Junior actually lived 14 miles away from the farm. So it was really hard for him to drive back and forth for lunch. So he'd never seen his kids or his wife. He just stayed on and had lunch at his mother's place. Well, what was happening is he was walking in for breakfast, and he was sleeping on the couch for an hour after, kind of watching The Price is Right or Wheel of Fortune on television. He wasn't really effective with his time. What we got them to do was switch houses. So the father-in-law, he put his pride past, realized that having his grandchildren grow up at the farm was more of an importance than the convenience of living in the house that he liked.
Right.
And he put his family first in that context. And what happened was when Junior moved into the home farm, he didn't bring a television. And so there was no more Wheel of Fortune with Price is Right. What happened when Junior was having breakfast? He was having breakfast with his wife and kids, and he was fully present. He made a note of not bringing in his cell phone into the house. And so he spent the half an hour after breakfast on his knees playing on the carpet with his kids, farming the carpet instead of watching television. And what happened was that at the afternoon at 4:00, he had an agreement with his partners that if there wasn't anything pressing like taking silage off the field or doing planting corn, that he'd take between 4:00 to 5:00 just before they started night milking. For him to take a break and play with his kids. And up to that point, if he was seen by his dad kicking a soccer ball around the front yard, his dad would be saying, "Why aren't you working?" But then Dad seen that was important. And Junior came in. He still went out at night to check on the cows. But Junior made an effort after milking to come back into the house and tuck his kids in and spend some time with his wife for an hour. So essentially, Junior was still working 15-hour days, but the 3 hours that he had off, he made sure to invest in that time in his family instead of wasting that time. And I think that's the thing about farming is that, I think you're going to actually have to work more hours than your parents did. But what we've got to get better at is more effectively managing our time like it's money and investing it in the farm and the family in more effective ways. There's a lot of guys that they claim they can't take their Saturday afternoons off because they've got too much work to do to go to a family wedding. Well, the truth, you get them to analyze what they've actually done for the week. You'll quickly realize on Tuesday afternoon you spent time wasted doing a project in the shop that you could have done in 1 hour instead of 4, but you putted it around. Well, what I'm really encouraging farm families to do is get really effective at investing their time like it's money, so that you can get off, you can get more work done on Tuesday than you won't have, and you put 60 hours of quality work into the farm through the course of the week, then taking off on Saturday afternoons to go to a family wedding, you don't feel guilt. I think that's really important.
Yeah. I catch myself in the middle of that too when Saturday afternoon comes around and I've spent an evening or two. I'm gonna take this evening off, and I'm not gonna do anything. You're gonna hang out, do whatever, and spend some time not working. And then come Saturday afternoon, I not like I spent that time with my kids or doing anything like that. I was just hanging out, watching Netflix on TV or whatever. I wasn't engaged in anything. And then Saturday comes around and I feel guilty about having to go off and do whatever because I've got all this other stuff to do back at home. And it's been a real big learning curve, as what that looks like. Yeah. So a couple of things I'd like to ask you about. Go ahead.
I should just say this, that one simple thing, anybody can apply this, not just farmers, is what I have a farmer do is write down in his notebook every night, what is the one thing you plan to do tonight with your kids for 20 minutes? Mm-hmm. And it can be a game changer. And you actually, we're all guilty of this, of bringing our phones into the house and watching Netflix or watching YouTube, right? The thing is that, if you can intentionally say, okay, how am I, for me, I try to invest an hour with my kids every night. Right. That's and at least 5 hours on at least 5 quality hours with with the kids on the weekends. But I intentionally write it down before those the first thing when I wake up in the morning. And by me asking myself, did I get that activity done? Well, it might be like tonight, I'm going to be teaching my kids how to play guitar. Right, and spend 20 minutes doing that with them, and then play basketball. Right, that's my intention, and so I have to ask myself tomorrow morning: did I actually get that done? And by you actually being intentional on how you invest your time like it's money with your family, you show me how you spend those 18 hours that you have, I'll show you where you're going to be in 18 years.
And I think you had a pretty good list of questions there at the end of your chapter about a few things, and one of them that really stuck out to me were, what were the 3 things you did that were time wasters?
Yeah.
And that was because you asked me the 3 things I did that I got accomplished. I'll tell you those right away. And then I start thinking about, well, I can give you a long list, a lot longer list than 3 things that I did that wasted time today.
Yeah. And when I sat down with Junior, that's what I did. Was I asked him, what are 3 things that if you had 10% more time, how would you invest that in the business and in the farm? And what it actually came out to was that the things that I mean, for Junior, if he had 10% more time, he would actually spend more time doing a better job of herd health. I mean, Junior was run ragged. I mean, 400 cows for 2 guys to milk, and with only 1 employee. That's a lot of work. If anybody that's the average dairy farmer that's between 40 and 50 cows per man, I mean, they were well over the nation's average. But the thing is, they were running 5 different directions because they were constantly putting out fires. And the thing is, Junior realized that, hey, if I put 10% more time into herd health, I dramatically improve profitability. And they actually went from something like 70 pounds to over 85 pounds. They increased the milk production by 15%. I think I don't know exact numbers, but it was pretty dramatic because he started to invest. He said, okay, how am I invest my time? Where should I be putting my priority?
Right.
And that it wasn't just as far as personal life; it was also in his business life. Right. And it made a whole change to how the farm's profit. I mean, it made a huge difference. And then for Senior, the thing is, a lot of farmers feel a lot of guilt to take time off because they have a partner that refuses to take time off. And for Senior, he came to the agreement, okay, it's fine if we hire a kid on weekends, you can take your time off, but I'm going to stay here working. And what happened with Senior is a Junior felt a lot of guilt taking this time off because his dad was still working. And that's a big component of the guilt, is a big factor in a lot of family farms. And I actually had to go out and almost grab Senior by the ear and force him to go on a date with his wife one Saturday night. We had the milker being trained. He had been doing it for a month. He knew what he was doing. Mm-hmm. That kid knew how to milk cows just fine. Senior wasn't needed to be around on that Saturday night. But to get him to actually get on a motorcycle, to take his wife for a spin, I mean, he almost punched me. But what happened actually was 6 months later at Christmas, he got terminal cancer. And he was dead by February. And Senior thanked me. He said, this has been the best year ever. We were in a whole different spot a year ago.
Right.
And I think that it's important for everybody to get a life beyond work, because we just don't know how much. I mean, if you can get better at investing your time like it's money, you'd be surprised by how much you can improve your profitability. But more importantly, how much, if you can get a little bit of a break away from the farm, how much more productive you are on a Tuesday afternoon. And more importantly, if you can get away from the farm and invest your time wisely, how much more productive mindset you have and a more positive person you are to be around. It's just a whole 360 degrees.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's kind of like the old saying, invest your time in stuff that you can control and change, and keep away from the stuff that you can't control.
Absolutely.
That's a good point to make there.
Absolutely.
All right. So a lot of jobs on the farm are once a year stuff, where it's planting, harvest, those kind of things, where you've got once a year, but it's a pretty intense time during that one time of year that they come around. How do you factor that stuff into this time management scenario?
I think you should have breakfast every Monday morning with your family, right? And what I generally get, if your normal start time is 7:00, everybody usually at the shop at 7:00 in the morning. I suggest your family gets up at 6:00 in the morning and has this breakfast meeting on Monday mornings, and gets a lot of bacon out, because who doesn't like bacon? But the thing is, that's the time and place you as a family talk about the forthcoming week and how you're going to invest that money. So if you have 3 partners and each partner is going to put 60 hours of time into the operation, you get an agreement as partners as to how we can best invest that time. And what I want to do is get everybody to agree on the priorities. Quite often I see partners, they get frustrated. They say, well, last Tuesday, he wasted the afternoon doing this. And then they throw around accusations. Well, Wednesday morning you did this and you were gone for an hour and a half and you didn't need to, you could have just ordered that part online instead of wasting your time driving into town for one part. And what I think is really important is that your family looks at the fact that you're about to invest 60 hours from each partner. That's 180 hours in the next week, right? The thing is, you should look at that as the same as investing money, and you should agree as partners as to how you're going to invest each person's time. What are the priority jobs that got to get done? So you got to identify by the end of this week, what are the 3 big things we got to get done? And then what are other tasks that would be nice to get done if we've got extra time? And then just kind of block off who's doing what on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But I think what's really important is that I use the Eisenhower method. The Eisenhower method is a method of prioritization, so it's based on importance and urgency. So if a job, you use a scale A to F to rank the importance of the job, and then on a scale 1 to 5, you rank their urgency. And so if you can get your farm family to start talking in terms of that, then you can have a discussion between your partners. You may think a job is a priority of 2A, but the truth is it's a priority of it might be a different priority to one of your partners. And what's really important is you get a discussion and agreement between partners as to how many hours, what the priority is. You can better learn to listen to each other's ideas. So the thing is that what I've actually found is that for farm debt cases, when I'm dealing with a farm debt case, the first thing I want to do is get the farm family to agree on the prioritization of the use of their time. So, I mean, a lot of farm families, they expect the first thing I'm going to look at is the farm financials. The first thing I do is get the farm family in the habit of meeting on Monday mornings and planning out who's doing what for the week and squeeze out more efficiency of what they get out of the week. And obviously that improves profitability from a time management standpoint because you can do the work of 4 men with 3 men or less. But more importantly, what that does is get the partners being able to listen to each other and agree on prioritization. And so what I'd rather have is an argument between partners about what Fred is going to be doing Thursday afternoon and have a 10-minute disagreement between partners and get past the egos where you get to the point that it's more important for things to be right than to be right in an argument.
So what about these non-routine jobs that come up like harvest planting, those kind of things where it's a once-a-year deal, but it's a pretty intense situation that pops up?
I think the thing is that, I mean, during harvest and planting, we don't have a problem communicating with partners. The problem is what we're doing February 15th. I mean, are you getting the maximum utility of your time in the month of February? I see a lot of farmers that they could be using this time to change oil in the tractor and change the filters, but they catch themselves doing that April 15th when they could be doing other jobs like fixing the tile in the fields. And that's because we as farm families when it's time to go, we don't have time. We don't have problems investing our time. The problem is that during those slow times, how are we most effectively investing our time so we're getting the best utility of our time 365 days of the year, not just for 60 days of the year. So the thing is, what I do with farm families is I meet with every farm family. I get the farm families to sit down and meet together for breakfast on Monday mornings, and basically they plan out who's doing what for the forthcoming week, right? And it starts off with the family listing off all the jobs that have to get done, and then agreeing on 3 priority jobs that by the end of the week, hell, rain, or fire, we've got to get these jobs done, and then identifying jobs that should be get done and be nice to get done. And then also identifying, if we're going to be tearing apart a combine 2 weeks from today, what parts do we have to order this week? in order to make sure that we have the parts on site. We're not just sitting around waiting for parts for 3 days until the John Deere dealership gets it to us. Because during COVID, it's a game changer as far as thinking ahead is really important as a family.
Right.
But the two things I'm very careful about with this meeting is, first of all, making sure that it's an hour before the time that you normally start your routine. So if your partners generally, everybody shows up at the shop at 7 o'clock in the morning, having that meeting at 6 o'clock in the morning, it will help you kickstart the week and make this meeting a priority, and it just doesn't get lost in, we're too busy to meet this week, right? It's got to be an hour before. The second thing is, I really emphasize that it shouldn't be grandpa showing up to the shop and then dictating, okay, this is what we're going to do this week. It should be the nephew or the grandson, the youngest successor, that comes to the table with a suggestion of the to-do list for the forthcoming week. And then everybody comes to the table with a filled out sheet of paper. They've actually spent 10 minutes before the meeting really thinking things through. So first of all, that you don't think about a task that should get done about 20 minutes after the meeting happened. But more importantly, what it does is teaches the successors to really be thinking critically about how they're investing their time, like it's money. There's a lot of farms where the son or daughters are in their 40s, and they show up to the shop at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they're used to grandpa or dad telling them what to do, and then dad gets hit by lightning, and they are not very effective in managing their time. And there's a lot of farm bankruptcies that happen because of this. I mean, I had a young farmer. He was a very competent individual, but he referred to his dad as a walking task list. And, he got cancer. His dad got cancer, and he should have been cutting hay, but he prioritized cutting the lawn because he was 35 years of age. And the reason why he didn't realize that cutting hay was more important than cutting the lawn, because he didn't learn how to think critically about his time. And you'd actually be surprised by how many successors in the 40s and 50s don't know how to organize their time. And as a result, farms fall apart because of this. Yeah. I think it's really important for the successors to come to the table with the suggestions first, and then have the parents and grandparents tweak the priorities and get really good at disagreeing. If you think that the son should be doing something different on Tuesday afternoon than he suggests, let's get really good at bickering about that. But more importantly, getting really good at listening to each other. So it doesn't, we get into, quite often in farm families, we get into discussions, and it becomes more important to be right than for things to be right. And that kills family farms. Yeah. If you can, and what I found in farm debt cases is that the first thing I do is get the farm family to get better at managing their time like it's money. And when I show up to do a farm cadet case, most people are surprised that I'm not analyzing farm financials. Well, the thing is that I want to have a disagreement between 3 or 4 partners about what we're doing on Tuesday afternoon with Fred's time, and what should Fred be doing, and get into an argument and looking at a couple different options and get the family better making decisions together. So essentially what I want to do is problem solve how the family problem solves, and take that to a whole different level. So egos go out the window. We're able to do what's right for the farm. Right. And then when we sit down and do farm financial analysis 60 days later, we're able to talk about these critical decisions without egos getting in the way. And it's I think it's like building a fire. You start with the kindling first, and add larger and larger logs onto the fire as the fire can handle it. It's the same thing with decision making. I think you've got to start with small little decisions first, and then be able to handle larger decisions, such as whether we should be selling a certain farm in order to cover a certain amount of debt, or even succession planning. For all succession cases, the first thing I do is get the farm family to bicker about small little how they invest their time. And then if we can get that sorted out, then sitting down to do succession planning, it's an afternoon conversation instead of a 10-year family feud. Right. So
we've done, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 of these podcasts together so far, Andy. And the theme I hear a lot in these podcasts when we were talking is the lack of alignment that you see on the farm, right? You have everyone's pulling a different direction, and everybody has a different goal, and the really only true way that you can really come be in alignment with anybody in the planet and doing anything, whether it's what we're having for dinner or where we're going to go on a date or whatever it is, you have to have a conversation. You have to speak, and you have to have some level of conflict in that conversation in order to get that robustness to come out of what's going on inside your head and what inside their head. And then everybody has to agree, not to disagree, but has to agree that when they walk out the door, that when there's not a meeting after the meeting. Yeah. And I think that's what I keep hearing out of what you're talking about.
You'd be surprised. I mean, obviously, getting more effective use of your time is going to make your farm more efficient from a time management standpoint. And so you're going to get more done with your labor. And that really adds up when you're able to add. I mean, if you can squeeze out an extra 10% labor efficiency and invest that time into things like improving your herd health in your dairy operation or do a better job of bookkeeping, it makes a huge difference. But more importantly, we start looking at time. Time is the most finite resource, right? And we often, as farm families, treat time as if it's an infinite resource. Well, it's the same thing with money. If we get better at managing our time and managing our time like a finite resource, then when we start to problem solve, how do we deal with cutting our budgets in different areas? It's 10 times easier to do because we got past the bickering and we're able to. I mean, a lot of farms we improve profitability between 20 to 50% within 2 years, just simply by managing time like it's money, and then the money flows as a side effect.
Yep. If you can get past the what you're doing and what I'm doing and who's doing what, when, and why, the rest of those conversations seem to be pretty easy.
Absolutely, and more importantly, for the successor, they may not have equity in the business, but if they can show up to the meetings and they're 22 years of age and they feel responsible, they're able to suggest to what they plan to do for the forthcoming week. Grandpa and dad might tweak what gets done, but that successor doesn't feel like a slave, doesn't feel like an employee. They start acting like an owner. And you'd be surprised, just this past week, I had a farm, I won't say what state, but the son was basically only putting in about 10 hours a week into the operation. He was getting paid for 60. And he's showing up because he laid out in front of his partners what he planned to get done before that in the week and what he planned to get done each day. He's been getting up at 5 o'clock every morning, and he's been putting in full hours, 12-hour days, because he acts like an owner now instead of a slave. And it's ownership of your time. Whether we didn't change his equity in the safe as far as his ownership on the farm on paper.
Sure.
But he gained real ownership of his time and became empowered. And I think it's a very powerful tool to get successors engaged in the operation success.
Yep. There's a leadership guy that I follow, Jocko Willink. He talks about, his book Extreme Ownership talks about decentralized command and how important that is to what that looks like. And here's a scope and vision of what we need to get accomplished. And here's your part, here's my part. How are we going to make that work? And you guys just figure it out. And I'm going to help and coach along the way. But quite frankly, you need to figure out how we're going to get there because I have other things to do too. I think that's when it comes to time management on some of these farms, when you start looking at what's happening, one person tries to control everything that's going around instead of trusting that what Andy's doing on his segment of the farm is getting done and getting accomplished, and he's going to be able to figure it out.
Yeah, I think you said there's a lot of things right there. First of all, the whole mindset of the farming operation goes from being a pecking order, where one person's a boss and the other people are the peons, to the whole mindset of the farm goes from me to we. This becomes our farm. If the grandson or the son-in-law is able to suggest what he's doing, he feels part of a team, and we create a whole team atmosphere. Now, outside of that hour meeting or a half an hour meeting, Grandpa's still the boss, right? If Grandpa says something, the grandson says how high. But during that meeting, if the son or the younger members, the less senior members of the team are able to suggest, they feel really empowered. Now, Jocko Willink, if anybody hasn't been exposed to Jocko Willink, he wrote a book called Extreme Ownership. I think it's an amazing book. It's actually, he comes up with a phrase, discipline equals freedom. Mm-hmm. And I actually have that. I mean, I get up at 4:00 every morning, read for a couple hours. And I have that right beside where I read. It's Jocko says discipline equals freedom. And I think if we can become more disciplined with our time, you wouldn't believe how much more productive your business is, and how much more productive your personal life is. You go from being a victim to being an owner of your destiny.
Right.
And it all starts with you managing your time like it's money.
Absolutely. Yep. No, I 100% agree. And I'm a big follower of what he talks about when he's looking at, and that's what I keep hearing the same themes that you're talking about, and the stuff that I listen to in this podcast and stuff I listen to in his book. So the alignment issue is a big thing when you're working with teams, that everybody's on the same page. Yeah. Understanding what that looks like moving forward, and not the same page because you're beat over the head to get on the same page. But the same page of, he talks about this a lot, and I say, no, I know you see this a lot there, and you've talked about it, where if it's your idea and you come up with how you're going to get it done, it's going to be a successful idea, and you're going to go forward with it, because you're not going to say your own idea is stupid, right? You're going to keep pushing through and making things happen. So,
and I think what's really important is a 7-minute max phone call at night between the partners. So I mean, things happen. There's always going to be breakdowns. Weather's always going to change. So the plan we had on Monday morning for what's going to go on Thursday is going to change. But what you got? I mean, you wouldn't start a football play in football without a huddle. Why the hell don't we apply the same principles in business? I mean, at least have a plan of attack at the beginning of the week. And what I like to see at the huddle, usually at sunset, so during the winter it'd be 5:00. During the summer it'd be around 9:00. You just have a 3-way call between, if you have 3 partners, or have everybody call into a conference call line. But basically, you volunteer. What do you plan to do tomorrow with your time? What's the one outcome that you want to get done by then and tomorrow night? And then you volunteer that. What's the number one priority? And then you have your partners hold you accountable. And if you didn't get something done, the question comes out, why not? Right? And you have that sense of accountability, and it drives you to get that thing done, right? Knowing that you're going to have a phone call by sunset tomorrow night, it drives you to not waste your time. And it also causes you to reflect, okay, a lot of farms, there's the phrase, there's always tomorrow. Well, that's how farms go bankrupt, right? If you always have that attitude. If you have an attitude of accountability where day to day you spell out what you're going to get done by tomorrow night, and you have your partners hold your feet to the fire. I mean, things happen, but if you have a form of accountability, it makes a game changer. And the second thing I like to do in that nightly phone call is identify one thing you don't want to do tomorrow. It can be a really simple task, like even cleaning out your truck, but you got to get done in order to make the farm successful. It might be a simple task like cleaning out the truck. It might be a simple task like talking to an employee about an uncomfortable topic that you've got to do to discipline them and make them better employees. But for you to volunteer that information to your partners and then actually have them hold you accountable by tomorrow night getting it done, it's a game changer to the farm's success.
Absolutely. All right, and hey, good stuff as usual. Folks want to reach out to you and get more information about these workshops you've got going on, and there's a lot of good information there. What's the best way to do that?
Just go to stubborn.farm. So www.stubborn.farm. I should mention that I do a 1-day workshop on Saturdays, and basically it's from 9 to 5. It's online. It's called Farming with Your Stubborn Family, and basically all I do is give away 10 simple ideas like what we just spoke about, and they're common sense, but they're also thought provoking. I mean, they're things that you wouldn't think about, but if you can apply these habits to evolve how you work together from good to great, it's a game changer to how your family works together. And it's like we used to do these workshops in person in small town communities, and never had a farmer not like it. But what we've actually found is that the online versions, it's like Alcoholics Anonymous for stubborn farm families. So the thing is that you're able to talk to other farmers going through similar problems and be more open about your situations, and you learn as much from the other farmers in different states as you do from me. And it's a really cool process. And I offer this course. I normally charge $300 an hour for what I do for a living. That's what I charge for the day. So you get basically a day's worth of my time, an hour's worth of my time. You get a day's worth. But we don't charge until the end of the day, and if you don't want to pay it, that's fine. The thing is, we have enough farmer go through this course and not like it, and I think that speaks a lot. So you can go to my website, stubborn.farm, and you can see the testimonials from other farmers. But I think the thing is you give me one day, you give me a Saturday, and I know how hard it is to get a day off the farm and to invest in something like this, but we'll double the odds of your family still farming together in 30 years' time.
Wow. Okay. Well, Andy, I appreciate you being on the podcast, man.
Appreciate that.
Right on.
Take care and God bless.
You too, man. I'm Casey Seaman with Moving Iron Podcast. Check me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Moving Iron LLC. Go to LinkedIn at Moving Iron Podcast and check out the video version of this on the Moving Iron Podcast YouTube channel. So check that out there. Go to Moving Iron LLC for everything Moving Iron related. So with that, I'm Casey Seymour with Andy Junkin. It's going to be smart, folks. Out.
Moving iron in the 21st century.